Hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. No Time to Die is almost upon us. We are days away, purportedly, from it being released. Despite the pandemic-fueled postponements, it appears, unless something happens at the 11th hour, that finally I'm going to be able to see No Time to Die. And I thought this was a prime opportunity to be able to go back and watch the beginning of the Daniel Craig era just before I watch the end of the Daniel Craig era. And it's funny really with Casino Royale, because one would be tempted to say that Casino Royale may be the best. It's probably the best Daniel Craig film, and it even is a contender for being the best James Bond film ever made. I'm not sure about that. I have complicated feelings about it, but it is a plausible thing to think, because I don't know, there's something about Casino Royale and the legacy of Bond at that particular point, and the nature of the story and its relationship to the original story. It's pretty damn good. It is a excellent film. For me personally, this was a very strange period in terms of the my relationship to Bond, because and I revealed this when I was discussing the Michael Jordan documentary, but I of course have almost an additional reason to have a relationship to Bond, because my name is of course Jordan Pierce Woodley, the Jordan after Michael Jordan, and the Pierce after Pierce Brosnan. So as you can imagine, I grew up with the Brosnan Bond sort of in my veins, as it were. That I definitely seen all of the Pierce Brosnan Bond films by the time Die Another Day had come out, and I to this date I've seen many of the Bond films. It's been something that has, like many young men, it has just been sort of with me from before I can remember. And of course, Die Another Day is not a good film. It's a complicated film, because there are moments where you go, I wish it had been this film that it promised to be, and there are moments within it that are genuinely excellent, but it is not a good film. It is not a good film as a whole, and it is the idea of losing sight of what Bond is, and frankly what would make a good story without becoming almost a parody of itself. Similar to the Roger Moore era and how that ended up doing the same thing. But as we transitioned into the Daniel Craig era, I was very much out, in the same way that I was out with Batman. That as I sort of was getting to an age where I was understanding the things I was watching, and I'd grown up with Batman and James Bond, had seen their highs and had seen their lows, and of course both of these properties were being rebooted at that time, around the same time, and I just felt my primary argument was, I feel like I came to the end of the journey with these characters. I can't think of why I would want to start again with these characters. They're starting their stories from the beginning. In both cases, I was very wrong, because it was very much a reimagining of these characters for a new era and a new style. And Casino Royale there's something about it that it understands Bond probably better than it had been understood for a long time. There are aspects of it. This is definitely a proto-Bond. It's only by the end of the film that you really fully have a actualized Bond as we understand him, but it's interesting seeing the journey from a somewhat sort of generic agent, a traditional MI6 agent, into the James Bond that we know. And what I like about this film more than anything is the fact that it clearly has a thesis. And I've mentioned this before, many, many times before, particularly with franchise stories, which is often the case is there is a thesis idea. Actually, I say in films, I think I consider this more in TV series, that a lot of popular television series with their first series like Westworld or Orange is the New Black, or Handmaid's Tale, that the first series has a clear thesis of some kind that it's trying to say. And it's only as you get into later series that it starts to struggle because it completed the message it had from the first series and it now needs to live on beyond that. And what I really like about Casino Royale is the idea that it clearly has a thesis, which is James Bond starts as I say, a more traditional agent, but he very clearly in this film is more human than Bond often is. As in, there is something more, there is more of a soul and a heart in Bond at the beginning of the film than there is at the end. And the point of the story is to see how we take someone and chip away any sense of sentimentality, any sense of humanity from this person until they become efficient, ruthless, driven, and James Bond essentially, and broken to some degree. Because of course, I mean, you don't really see the story begins with the first act of how the first crack appears or the first chip is made within the soul of of James Bond, with of course the double murder, particularly the first murder, and the whole idea that he's had to do these things and you've seen it take a toll on him. That first murder, it's all about how that wore away at him and the cost of essentially becoming a double O. And then over the course of the film, you see him compromise himself and sacrifice bits of himself. And then, of course, you come to the ending and the fact that his heart has been almost completely annihilated, so that by the end of the film, you know, the humanity is gone from him. Unfortunately, there is something to be said about, and as I was saying with TV, these sort of prestige TV series, you have that centralized thesis, and then as stories continue, there's a struggle for how do we then go beyond that. And you could make the case that the Craig Bond films have really struggled with their identity following that. Quantum of Solace is a genuinely terrible film. Like, I will make no compromise in that it is, because it commits the cardinal sin, which is it is boring. And I'd rather see 100 Die Another Days that make no sense, are completely outside of our world, and are full of sort of Bond cliches, then I'd see this agonizingly drab, self-contemplative. It's supposed to be in the real world, so it's dealing with real world issues that frankly just don't feel very Bond. And it's just dull. I love Skyfall. Skyfall is a fantastic film. Spectre is a troubled film. And I think Spectre has that problem. Spectre has the biggest problem, maybe and Quantum of Solace, both have the problem where they don't know how, once they've taken away everything from Bond in terms of his heart, this version of Bond is the emotive Bond. This is the Bond who actually feels things, and you see him being worn away and the cost of being James Bond on him. But that means it contradicts the end of Casino Royale to some degree, and particularly with Spectre, where of course we see him go off with a woman he loves, which of course is completely contradictory to the end of Casino Royale, where it's the idea that he, you know, Vesper's betrayal takes his ability to sort of, takes what remnants of that, his ability to do that from him. And so on and so forth. And it's, you know, when we get to After No Time to Die and all of this is settled, maybe this will be a great continuous narrative. But standalone Casino Royale feels like it hits so many good points. And just It subverts where it needs to, but it doesn't winkingly subvert. It just knows how to set up and pay off the story of James Bond, and it makes a short story that, frankly, is it a short story or not, or a novella? I can't quite remember. I have read it weirdly, and I can't remember, but it's it's a very simple story, which is James Bond goes to a casino, plays poker to capture it in the aims of capturing a guy. Stuff happens. There's betrayals. There's stuff, but it's a very straightforward story and is mostly set around the poker table. It's only in this adaptation that, frankly, as I was watching it, I forgot how much happened in the first hour that leads up to the poker game. The embassy, the African embassy set piece, the hunting down of the guy who's going to blow up the Sky Spectre plane, whatever it's called, the prototype plane, and you have these huge action sequences that then lead into the casino. And at that point, you have such a sense of identity and character and relationship, and Vesper's been established, and Le Chiffre has been established, that absolutely, you can... They make the casino card, the poker game, interesting in a way that one would not imagine you would be able to make a poker game interesting. And of course, Le Chiffre. Now, as I say, I was a certain period in my life when this came out, and I actually didn't watch it in the cinema. It was only years later that I went back to watch it. And another thing that I didn't appreciate till years later is how good Mads Mikkelsen is. I mean, I am a huge Mads Mikkelsen fan, partly because of Hannibal and of course Star Wars, and but he's an actor who, no matter what he does, I am fascinated. And it's only going back and watching this that I appreciate how good he is in the role of Le Chiffre. That character, there's, even though it's an incredibly low stakes film compared to the world ending stakes that will come before and after with Bond, this is a character piece and is much more about traditional spying and spycraft and assassinations and stuff like that, and espionage, than a lot of Bond is. This is one of the closest to being a spy film that Bond has been since probably, I don't know, a long time. And again, it's so good. And like I said, Mads Mikkelsen against Daniel Craig. And Daniel Craig, I never understood the criticisms of Daniel Craig were so superficial. I've never understood them. And I'm gonna say, as I've said, it's up there, contender as one of the best Daniel Craig films, and this might be one of the best films of the Bond, legacy. But and those are up for debate, but I absolutely am behind the fact that Daniel Craig is the best Bond, in my opinion. The best Bond. Because there's just, he manages to sort of both be the sort of the facade of Bond with the shaken not stirred and the gadgets and the womanizing that ultimately sort of is empty and meaningless, whilst also being a much deeper and complicated character. Possibly he goes a little bit too far the other way, that he is, that he isn't quite... The facade side slips a bit because you get so much of a human story and a story of suffering and sacrifice. I genuinely think if we're talking a true realization of Ian Fleming's vision, I think Daniel Craig is the best version of that. But yeah, this film is just phenomenal. It is. I think it's so good. The only criticism I have, and it's more a me thing, and on this watch I felt my feelings were not as simple, not as clear as they have been in the past, which is I don't love the ending. Simply because, and this is the case where, because of reading the original story, I think the original story is much more painful. Spoilers, Casino Royale, a 16-year-old film, but the fact that Vesper kills herself in the novel is much more... It makes much more sense in the story of James Bond and the sacrifice, and of course when he gives that final line, it makes a lot more sense in terms of going forward than the big dramatic set piece where she essentially sacrifices herself. And it's much more tragic in terms of, this organisation has taken her away from James Bond because it externalises the event rather than her betrayal being almost like a personal knife between the ribs betrayal. And I don't know, I just don't think I needed a giant, huge, water-filled set piece as buildings are collapsing. I was much happier with the quieter, more intimate set piece between Mads Mikkelsen and Daniel Craig. And I didn't need the huge spectacle of it, but that is ultimately Bond. I am interested to see what No Time to Die, how it completes this story, because Daniel Craig has gone on a long journey since then, and who's to say, this won't be a representation of the Casino Royale Bond, it will be a representation of the journey of the Daniel Craig Bond, but I hope it pays off where it's, or at least acknowledges where it started. And then of course going forward, who's to say? I'm in the camp of people who thinks that Bond, if Bond's to be rebooted, setting it in the 60s would be a more interesting direction to take it rather than just recast again. We'll see, who's to say? There are many years going forward of what Bond could and could not be. But whatever the case, Casino Royale is phenomenal. It is such a good film. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because this all helped me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to get notifications for when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 250 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.